All right, so how the brain works. What the brain picks up in our reality, or what we see in our reality, are simply signals produced by the brain, or what the brain picks up, converts from signals stimulated from our senses, our eyes, our ears, our nose, and generates a simulated reality that we perceive as real. So it's just like the movie The Matrix, when Morpheus talks to Neo in the beginning of the movie, and he cue the video.
Right now, we're inside a computer program.
Is it really so hard to believe? Your clothes are different, the plugs in your arms and head are gone. Your hair has changed. Your appearance now is what we call residual self-image. It is the mental projection of your digital self.
This isn't real.
What is real? How do you define real? If you're talking about what you can feel, what you can smell, what you can taste and see, then real is simply electrical signals interpreted by your brain.
And in science, they have discovered that we only see 4% of the reality that we perceive, right? It could be slightly more for some people, or less, right? And based on this information, this shows how much we are actually missing in our reality. But it also, to me, from my experience, and then also this experiment that I am going through right now, it shows me how our brain actually sees the reality, how our brain converts the reality into this simulated structure where we see leaves and grass, and we're sitting on something, we're talking or communicating through a camera, through a lens, right? And based on others' perception of their reality, or what they perceive internally, they would perceive the reality then based on that. And this is where the reticular activating system comes in. All right, so here we're going to go through neuroplasticity. So neuroplasticity is our brain's ability to rewire itself based on focus, repetition. So as we repeat certain tasks, or even imagine, right, in our minds, we are actually reinforcing a particular pathway that the neurons will take, right? And so this is where imagination plays a key role. Our ability to visualize plays a key role. For example, athletes, you would hear runners, for example, they talk about visualizing themselves winning or succeeding, right? This is a form of, this is a technique that also stimulates the brain, which causes the neuroplasticity, causes the brain to rewire itself. You would also hear basketballers talk about seeing themselves scoring, or the ball going through the hoop, right? Again, another form of reinforcement going on there, because as Dr. Joe Dispenza says, right, neurons that fire together wire together. So the association, even the thoughts, the behaviors, they wire together and reinforce themselves. And we must also incorporate or include the emotional charge. Also plays a very important role here as well. Another experiment that was done was an MRI scan on the brains of a person who didn't play piano but visually rehearsed, and they compared it to the brain map of someone who was actually playing piano, and both persons' brains lit up similarly. When we vividly visualize, our brain again doesn't know the difference between what we are vividly visualizing and our actual reality. And so again, if we visualize it clear enough, we also get the emotional charge happening in there, which is one of the more important parts of it, that we have the emotional charge, which then again sends a signal to the body that this thing is actually happening for real. And we then get that neuroplasticity, which rewires our brain to then get the reticular activating system moving in terms of filtering out certain realities, which is what I would have been mentioning then when I talked about the experience that I had with the, for example, the battery, right? My experience with my phone battery, and then also the experience that I had with my with parking spots, finding parking spots, where the reticular activating system, what it does is that when you change your belief, so if you have a belief, a story that's playing out in your mind, what happens is that the reticular activating system, which is within the brain stem, actually filters out particular things within your reality. So for example, if I was looking for, let's say, red cars, my reticular activating system would start to filter out everything else and only allow me to mainly focus on red cars. So all of a sudden, which would be considered to be confirmation bias, I would start to see a lot of red cars around the place, right? Same with parking spots, right? Like if I start like seeing positive or believing in positive outcomes when it comes to parking spots, I would start to see more parking spots or parking opportunities. It's the same with, it can be applied to life in general, right? If you change your belief in terms of seeing abundance in small ways, or well, sometimes it's best to start in that way, right? You may see $1 on the ground, or a couple cents or whatever, right? And depending on how your response is to that experience, your reticular activating system would then confirm, okay, yeah, we're gonna actually start filtering out a bit more things. So in terms of you being able to see more, right, perceive more, because again, we're only seeing 4% of our reality, so our subconscious mind actually is influencing a large percentage of the stuff that we don't see, right? All right, so the next one is the placebo effect, and how the placebo effect actually affects the body. So years ago, I would have been, I still am. My imagination affects my body pretty strongly. When I can even say certain things, and it wouldn't affect it in the ways of like some miraculous kind of like, you know what I mean, like woo woo kind of thing. At least not yet. At least not yet. In some instances, it has though, right? And for example, I can imagine, if I imagine strong enough, vividly enough, fire around my hand, I would literally start to feel, or even in my in the signaling in my mind, I would hear a crackling, right? And even feel heat on my hand. You would see instances where monks, for example, in the Himalayas, you would hear stories about them coming out of caves and they can touch rock and melt the rock and stuff like that. But one of the simpler cases is people receiving sugar pills, right? Sugar pills, believing that the sugar pill, or believing that this pill was the cure to their ailment, the cure to a disease that they had, whether it's cancer, whether it is whatever it is, right? And in them believing it, their ailment went away, their ailment disappeared, right? I believe in TED Talks, I believe in TED Talks, there was a video talking about that actually, and how our brains have the ability, if we change our perception, if we change our belief of what is going on, and for some people is those who have multiple personalities, right, that their actual physiology changed immediately when they switched personalities that have completely different views of the world, completely different experiences, or at least they have in their minds a man who, for example, may have another personality that is blind. They documented, and I'll see if I can maybe make the link below. Yeah, that the his body actually changed its physiology. And you would see it in even like movies like what was the name of the movie? Split. Yeah, that was a good example. But yeah, there's so much research in that alone that shows how, even again, just creating, just changing these stories that we have in our minds. And one of the best ways to change these stories in our mind is by visualizing, vividly visualizing, or vividly imagining things within our mind. Again, the brain doesn't know the difference between the imagination and reality. And as we practice visualizing more, we're able to actually change those realities. So yeah. So in the end, it's the realization that the imagination is not just daydreaming. I grew up thinking and believing that it was just daydreaming. It was just something that some people can do better than others, but the imagination actually holds the blueprint for shaping your future experiences. And again, a lot of this goes into holographic theory. I would have done a video on that. I'm gonna see if I can maybe link it at the end, right? And yeah, it's it's very powerful though, for real. Yeah, and a lot of this information is becoming more mainstream right now, as many more people, especially as we go into the deeper aspects of quantum physics and quantum computing and even artificial intelligence, right? We are being exposed to the remembering of so much in our reality right now. Yeah. So yeah.